So we are working on converting between fractions, decimals, and percents. So I've set up a few portions webs here, and the first one we have is 1/10. So really, we can start out by writing down our words that go with this fraction. And I like to write down exactly what the fraction, how I would say the fraction, which is 1/10. And really, this means that 1 out of every 10 I could shade in. So I could think of it as 1 out of this row, 1 out of that, and all the way down I'm really filling in one whole column here. Okay, I can also use my giant 1 to get my fraction to be out of 100 because we're thinking about the 100% block, and that's going to help us get our percent. So I know that 10 times 10 is 100, and if I multiply the denominator, I also need to multiply the numerator by 10, and 1 times 10 is 10, which is exactly what I shaded over there. So if you think about this as our 100% block, this is really every single little box inside of that 100% box is equal to 1%. And I've shaded in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, just like my fraction says. And that really is 10%. Now I can also use that 100% block to help me make my fraction, or my decimal, or I can use division. I can take that fraction and I can actually divide it. I can take 1 and divide it by 10. Now 10 doesn't go into 1, so I'm going to add a 0 and I'm going to put my decimal up top there. 10 goes into 10 one time. 1 times 10 is 10, and if I subtract that I get 0. So there's my decimal. And this does make sense because if I think about place value and I look at my big 100% block again, what I'm really seeing is I don't have the whole block filled in. That would be our ones place. The tens place is each of these columns. Do I have any full columns filled in? Yes, I have one of them. Do I have anything left over? No. So I could actually put a 0 there. Either way, these both mean the same thing. All right, there's example number 1. Our next example is 5 hundredths. That's our fraction. So I could write that in right away, 5 hundredths. And it's important that you have the TH because 5 hundredths is very different than 5 hundredths, and it is 5 hundredths. So this, I would actually be filling in 5 individual boxes. And if we're thinking about those as percents again, this would be 5%. Notice that 5 and 5 are the same. As long as that denominator is 100, I can just take that numerator and that's my percent. Again, that denominator has to be 100 in order to do that. So I can divide 5 by 100. 100 doesn't go into 5, so I'm going to add a 0. Put my decimal up top. It doesn't go into 50 either. It does go into 500. It goes in 5 times, and that would be 5 times 100 is 500, and I'm left over with 0. So my decimal is 0.05, which again makes sense. I don't have a whole block. I don't have a full column, but I do have 5 hundredths left over, thinking about place value. Ones, tenths, and hundredths. All right, there's example number 2. All right, our next one is 26 hundredths. So I'm going to just write that in. 26 hundredths. And like I said before, if my denominator is 100, I can take that numerator and I can make it my percent. So that would be 26%. This really is 26 of these boxes shaded in. So there's 10, 20, and then an additional 6. So I don't have any full boxes shaded in. I have 2 full columns and 6 left over, and I can show this over here. Okay. 100 doesn't go into 2. Ooh. It doesn't go into 6. But it does go into 260. There would be 2 hundreds. And if we subtract, we're left over with 60. Well, 100 doesn't go into 60, but it does go into 600 6 times, which would be 600. And if I subtract, I'm left over with 0. So that, again, matches there. Now, what happens if they don't give you the fraction to start out with? So if we take a look at this 75%. Now I can draw that out on my 100% blocks. 75%. I'm going to color in 75 of them. So there's 75. So all of that. Now, what I really just shaded in was 75 out of 100. But we're practicing on simplifying our fractions. So what can I divide both of these numbers by? Because I want to simplify. Well, I know 25 goes into 75 and 25 goes into 100. There are 3 25s in 75, and there are 4 25s in 100. I'm thinking quarters there. So this is my fraction. Now I could write for my words either 75 hundredths or 3/4, and that's a lot less, so I'm going to write 3/4. And again, I can take my fraction and I can divide 4 doesn't go into 3, but it goes into 30 7 times. That's 28. Left with 2. Doesn't go into 2, but it goes into 20 5 times. So there we go. Last one, 0.5 they're giving us. So if I'm thinking about what that means in terms of my 100% blocks, the 5 is in the tenths place, so that means I'm coloring in 5/10. And we say that as 5/10. So I can tell right now that this is going to be 5/10. And I shaded in 5 columns of 10, so 5, 10, 50, I'm sorry, 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. So that's 50%. And again, I want to simplify what goes into both 5 and 10. 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 10 divided by 5 is 2. My fraction is half. And that actually does make sense. If we're looking, I shaded in half of the circle. Half of 100 is 50. All right. We can also show it. All right, well, now go ahead and start your practice.